Greetings, Earthlings. Today we are taking a look at the Casio A1200WH1A digital wristwatch world time illuminator, an extremely affordable GMT world time, whatever the hell you want to call it. This thing goes for around $20 to $25, and it is insanely feature-packed. Let's start by talking about the build quality of this watch. The entire case, it looks as though it is metal, but it is just a plastic that is painted to look like metal. So it ends up feeling a little bit cheap, a little bit weak, and it is a bit lackluster. The bracelet on this thing is made out of metal, and the finish does not seem to match the case when you look closely at it. If you just take a quick glance, yeah, it may look the same, but in reality, it does look quite different there. Also, the bracelet is what would be called a rolled link, so it is not a sturdy feeling construction of the bracelet. It gets to be a little bit jingly and jangly. It is a little bit noisy. It will tug your hairs as well. The clasp on this is a push button deployant, I think that's what it's called. So you have two buttons on either side. You depress both of them and then lift it up. It is a pressed clasp, so it is, again, not going to be the highest quality, but given the price, can't expect it. You also have 4 options for a micro adjust on the bracelet, which is great. This helps fine-tune the sizing if your wrist is in between the size of removing or adding one of the links. When we look at the weight, this comes in at around 83 grams. When I sized it for my 7¼ inch wrist, this allowed it to disappear on my wrist. I would frequently forget that I was wearing it until I started hearing the jingling and jangling of the bracelet, or until it tugged on one of my arm hairs. A couple other things about the build quality. The crystal is a mineral crystal, so it will be more prone to being scratched up during daily wear. The water resistance on this thing is 100 meters or 10 bar, and the watch is made in China if that is of any concern to you. When we look at the case diameter, we are looking at 39.5 millimeters, so about 40 mil. Then when we measure from lug to see how wide this will sit on our wrist, we get a size of 44 millimeters. And you can see that there really isn't anything in terms of protruding end links with this bracelet. Next, we'll measure the lug size on this watch, and this will determine what size straps we would replace it with. So 18 millimeter straps ought to fit this. And lastly, the thickness of this watch comes to 13 millimeters. So it is a somewhat thick watch. Now let's walk through all of the features on this watch. The first display you have is an analog representation of your local time. You also have a display in the upper right, which will show you if you have any alarms set, if you have the hourly notice set, or if you have the watch muted so you can scroll through all of the menus without making a bunch of noise. Below that, you have a world map to indicate the time zone that you're in. You have the day, date, and the time with AM or PM indicator next to that. Now, while you are on your home time zone, you're able to hit the lower right-hand button to set other time zones. You can have up to 3 in this menu. I have LAX, New York City, and London set. Now we're back on the home time zone. We'll hit the lower left button next, and this will take you to a 5th time zone. I have mine set to Wellington, New Zealand, because I have some friends out in New Zealand that I want to know what time it is for them. Then if you go again, you have 5 alarms that you can set, and I will demonstrate these in a second. You use the lower right-hand button to scroll through them. I think I said 5. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 alarms, and this is how you would turn on or off the hourly dings, the hourly beeps. If you press the lower left-hand button again, this takes you to the countdown timer. You would hold the upper left hand to adjust this, and once it is set, lower right-hand button to start the countdown timer, lower right-hand button to stop it, and upper left-hand button to reset. Hit the lower left-hand button again, and we have a stopwatch, standard functionality going to 1/100th of a second. Upper left-hand button to reset it. Hit it again and we are back on our home time. I will shut off the lights now and show you the backlight function on this, the illuminator. And when we press the light, there you go, 351. The light is significantly better than the F91W A158. Actually legible, hour, minutes, and seconds. Great backlight on this thing. Now I'll go ahead and point my microphone at the watch and I will set off the alarm so you can hear how that sounds. And here is how the watch fits on my 7¼ wrist. As I rotate it around, there you go. That's the bracelet. That's the deployant clasp. Very nice fitting for a 7-inch wrist. Really like it. Now let's get to the review section of this video where I share more of my opinion. I'll start with the pros and then go to the cons. The first thing that I want to mention is the 10-year battery life. That is a huge pro. I've seen a lot of reviews of people saying it doesn't have solar, it doesn't have rechargeability. It's $25. I don't necessarily think it should. 10 years for a battery is incredible. You will most likely beat the hell out of this thing until it dies before you even have to replace the battery. And after 10 years, if the watch is still running, I don't think anybody is going to mind having to spend $3 on a replacement battery. The second pro that I have is the backlight on this thing. It is actually usable. It makes the time legible, and I have used this in the middle of the night many a time. I really enjoy having an actual usable backlight. Another thing that I did not anticipate enjoying as much as I did was having a bunch of alarms on my watch. This allowed me to set an alarm to wake up, set an alarm to tell me to stop working and actually go eat my lunch and my dinner, and an alarm to get off my butt and do something, and an alarm to demonstrate the alarm. I really found that functional and useful, and it wasn't like my phone where the phone may be in the other room going off and you can ignore it or not hear it. This is on your wrist. You cannot avoid it. You cannot ignore it. I found that a lot more useful than I anticipated. And the last pro for me is actually the main selling point of this watch. It is a world timer. I have found way too much joy in the fact that I am able to know what time it is where all of my friends are around the world. I spend way too much time in Discord, and I talk to people all over the world, so having the ability to look down at my wrist and know what time it is in New York City, in London, or in New Zealand, I find that not just useful, but it adds this extra bit of a connection to them. And while we've been isolated, I have found that a little bit more comforting. I know that sounds hokey and cheesy, but I've really enjoyed that feature as well. Then as far as the cons of this watch, I have zero issues with the functionality. I found all of that useful, rather intuitive, and a lot of fun to use. I don't have any issues with the value of this thing. For $25, I shouldn't be complaining about anything, but I'm going to because I think I ought to point out the shortcomings of this. That way, if Casio ever releases an updated version, maybe they can improve upon it. The first con that I have is the plastic build of the case. First off, it ends up feeling a bit cheap. It feels weak. It doesn't instill confidence. I feel as though I will end up breaking it because of the plastic build of the case. Also, the case does not match the bracelet, and it just looks a little bit funky. If you end up looking close at the watch at all, I think that's really a letdown, and I would have liked to have seen them attempt to match the case and the bracelet a little bit better, or even better, make the case out of the same steel or a little bit stronger steel than the bracelet. That way it is an exact match, and the case would feel a bit better as well. And the case is a jingly mess that will pull out your hair. If I haven't done it already, I'll hold this up to the microphone. Listen to the jingle on that. You will be like a cow being led to slaughter while wearing this thing. That's a bit morose, isn't it? I don't know if that's appropriate. You'll just be jingling as you're walking around. Maybe nobody else will notice, but you'll notice. And I think that's going to wrap up my video covering the Casio AE1200WH1A. I think I got that right. They do also have a black resin case and a black resin strap on it. They have the same model here, just with a light gray insert as opposed to the dark black insert. Those are a couple other options out there, very similar pricing. But this is my first video on this new Watchcastage YouTube channel. I would love to hear from you. What do you think I did well? What do you think I didn't do well? What would you like to see in future videos? And how do you think I can do a better job to serve you? What information are you looking for that you're not getting? Until next time, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you later. Bye. It's too zoomed in. I can't. There's the watch again. We'll end on that. It's a watch.